Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. This podcast is hosted by Asher Agency, a full-service partner to clients nationwide. Asher's services include media planning, creative, digital and social, website development, public relations, printing and fulfillment, and more. Anything you need to connect with your prospects and tell your story. To learn more, visit asheragency.com or contact us at hello@asheragency.com. My guest is Sam Bostater. Sam, did I pronounce your name right?
You got it right.
Excellent.
Thanks, Anthony.
Well, your LinkedIn pronunciation tool helped me get the job done. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast. You and I met a couple of years ago when you took the social media class through Purdue Fort Wayne. Yep. You were a standout student. I was like, he doesn't need me. He knows all this stuff already. But hopefully that was a good experience for you.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
absolutely.
Good. Well, good. Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the other things you've done in your career. Even though it's been short, you're pretty young, so you're just getting started in your career, but you've done some cool things. And then we'll talk about the organization you work for and some of the things you're working on. But let's start at the beginning, whatever that means to you. When did you start thinking about careers, and when did you point yourself in the direction you're headed in now, and why?
Excellent question. So for me, when I was in college, I would say I was still in my sophomore year, and I was having kind of a hard time figuring out where I wanted to go. Okay. I kind of knew I wanted to do business, but I wasn't sure exactly marketing, management. A lot of people did management. Maybe that's more my speed.
Yep.
But I ultimately settled on marketing. And the reason is I remembered that in fourth grade in elementary school, we actually did this project where we had we sold cookies and treats and stuff. And my favorite part of that was making the ads and all the artsy creative stuff. Okay. So here I am in marketing, and I still don't regret the decision. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because you think if you land on business as a major, it's like, I've figured it out. And what you realize is business is pretty broad. Mm-hmm. And that's almost like saying general studies. So good for you for figuring it out relatively young. So You went to Purdue Fort Wayne. Was it IPFW when you started? Or was it?
For me, it was Purdue Fort Wayne all the way through.
I forget how young you are. So it's always been Purdue Fort Wayne. And did you grow up in Northeast Indiana?
Pretty much. I actually moved here with my family when I was 5. Okay. We are from Ohio.
Got it.
Moved here.
Okay. So you go to PFW, study marketing, and while you're in school, you had an internship. Is that correct?
It is, yep. I worked for Beacon Health System, and they are actually based in Granger, Indiana.
Okay. So were you on site?
Partially. It was hybrid. So Thursdays, I would make the 2-hour commute out there, but fortunately, every other day of the week, it was virtual. Okay.
So in the healthcare universe, and then when you're in school, if I have this right, you worked for DeBrand. Is that correct?
Yep.
So for those, most of the people listening to this will know what DeBrand is, but for those who don't know what DeBrand is, tell us a little bit about DeBrand and your role there.
Oh my goodness. DeBrand is a chocolate shop, and they have the best chocolate I've ever tasted.
Okay.
And I could rave about that job all day. But the biggest takeaway for me from that job was they have pretty high standards for customer service.
Okay.
And I think that really kind of helped me getting into this. I'll talk about more what I do now, but the community engagement aspect of my job. So
Sam, when you're at DeBrand though, am I correct? You go into it saying, this is just a job that's going to help me get through college. It was potentially just a job, but it became more than that. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I attribute that job completely to how I actually got my job at Aging and In-Home. Okay. Weirdly.
All right. So let's talk about that, because you finish at PFW in 2022 and you start at Aging and In-Home when? Is it immediately after graduation?
I had a couple months. So graduation was in June, and then I started in August.
Okay. So what happens that is the spark from DeBrand to Aging and In-Home Services?
Right. So at the time when I graduated, I was sharing rent for a home with 4 other people.
Okay.
One of them was actually a case manager at Aging and In-Home.
Ah, okay. All right.
So she kind of told me, hey, I know you're looking for marketing jobs.
Yeah.
Aging and In-Home has an opening for a marketing position.
Yep.
So that's kind of how I found out about that job. I was like, she talks about how she loves the organization. So.
Yeah. So was the fact that you had some prior healthcare experience, did that lead you towards aging and in-home services, or was that a complete accident?
That was more of an accident, I'd say, more than anything.
Yeah, okay, so not something you sought out, but hey, sounds like a job worth pursuing, so I'm going to go for it. And for those who, I'm sure there's folks listening to this who have not heard the name Aging and In-Home Services because it's a pretty niche, niche organization. Tell us a little bit about what the organization does and what your role is there.
Definitely. So Aging and In-Home Services, it's kind of a mouthful, I know, so I'll call it AIHS.
Okay.
It's actually the Area 3 Agency on Aging.
Okay.
So essentially what that means is we are an organization founded by the government, by the Older Americans Act, and we help older adults, people with disabilities, and family caregivers. And the idea is that older Americans with our assistance can stay in their own homes longer rather than go to a nursing home.
Okay. All right. So, and when you say Area 3, what's the geography that encompasses?
Yeah, so it's Northeast Indiana. It's 9 counties, and I'll see if I can get them all here. So
okay.
It's Adams, Allen, DeKalb, Huntington, LaGrange, Noble, Steuben, Wells, and Whitley County.
Okay. So for those of you who are listening but not watching, Sam did that by counting one by one, and he did it in alphabetical order, which I'm going to give him credit for, but I think that's how you got there, was by doing it in alphabetical order.
I've written that list out so many times, and that's what does it for me. So
talk a little bit about your role. The organization also obviously does very important work. What is your role in that? How do you help the organization achieve its mission?
You bet. So my title is Community Engagement and Marketing Specialist. Yep. So from that, you can kind of parse, there's 2 components. First, there's the community engagement part. So that is going out in the community, giving presentations, agency overviews, talking about the services that we provide.
Yep.
We do those at the local councils on aging, at local assisted living facilities, you name it. And I also go to expos, like fairs, things, spreading the word about our services.
Yep.
And then the marketing component is the other half. For that one, I do a couple things on the digital side.
Yep.
So I create our monthly newsletter.
Okay.
I create our Facebook posts,
okay.
The graphic design and the copywriting and everything. And the occasional LinkedIn post as well.
Okay.
Oh, and I also do quite a bit with the website.
Okay. And you are part of a larger team. Tell us a little bit about that team. Who do you work with, and how do you intersect with those folks?
Yeah. So the marketing team is actually me and my supervisor. Her name's Megan, and she was actually a guest on the podcast before.
Yep.
But we actually work pretty closely together. I draft up the content, and she kind of proofs it, gives me some feedback. Yep. We work pretty well. We've been doing it for a couple of years now. So
Yeah. So Megan, she was remote, but now she's back in town, still remote because she just had a baby. Do I have that right?
She just had a baby, but she's actually, just as a couple of weeks ago, she came back to the office.
Okay. So. Well, welcome back, Megan. Welcome back. So Sam, you've got a complexity in your job in that you're not only trying to reach the end users of your services, but you're probably also trying to speak to people who influence them. That could be their adult children. It could be other caregivers who might be referral sources. How are you doing that in today's environment where it's really hard to cut through the clutter? The audience is very fragmented. How are you ensuring that the right message gets in front of the right person?
Yeah, and it's definitely a challenge. But I would say that the in-person, like, community engagement piece is the biggest driver for us. Nothing beats those face-to-face interactions, telling people, hey, this is what we can do for you. If you're a caregiver, we can give you respite care so that you don't get burnt out. If you're an older adult and you don't know how to, like, navigate the system, there's so many services out there.
Yeah.
This is what we can do for you.
Okay.
But I like to do the Facebook page just as kind of like a constant reminder still for people, like, hey, here's some useful tips for navigating the system as well, if you're a caregiver. And we actually have seen some success with that too.
All right. So what do you attribute that success to? And this goes back to something we talked about in the class where organic Facebook is only going to take you so far. Are you actually doing advertising? You're doing boosted posts? You're doing a combination of strategies on Facebook?
Actually, just organic for us
Just
mostly.
Organic. Okay. Yep. Why do you think you're having success when so many other brands are having challenges with that?
I think it's because of the humanizing of the brand we've done. We actually do this campaign right now where it's like a staff spotlight, more or less.
Yep.
And people love those. Like, we get all kinds of engagement on those. And I really think that goes miles to like, hey, like, these are the people you're talking to on the other side of the phone. Like, these are your case managers. These are the options counselors.
Yeah. So you're in an environment where, and correct me if this is wrong, and it may very well be wrong, where you probably can't do much to feature the end users of your service because of confidentiality. Right. So you've turned that around and said, we're going to make the faces that we feature those of our staff, the people who are intersecting with those end users, and we're going to showcase their personalities and their talents and all those things. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And I would guess that when you do that, you're going to reach audiences that you wouldn't otherwise reach because the individuals you're featuring are then sharing the stories through their personal Facebook. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So what are some of I'm going to pick your brain here for a second.
Go for it.
What are some of the things that you're doing with Facebook? You mentioned featuring some of your staff. What are some things you're doing to really make the most of that? Give us some examples of how you're using Facebook to really make sure that those posts resonate with your audience. I'll give you an example. You're using video. Mm-hmm. Okay, tell us why you think video is important.
Well, just from a general marketing standpoint, video is always good because it gives people, kind of going along with the staff thing, that face-to-face. Like, you can see who's behind the camera, who's behind the Facebook page. And for us, I guess one thing that I should explain is when I manage Aging and In-Home's Facebook page, it's actually for, I have a separate page for Pace of Northeast Indiana as well, which is kind of our sister company. And that is a Facebook page that leverages the video more. On there, we do all kinds of like testimonial videos.
Okay.
And that is really, pushing the point from participants, like people who are taking advantage.
Yeah. Because you don't have the confidentiality issues that you might have with the other parts of the business. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're getting the appropriate sign-offs and all the right approvals.
The photo releases. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you're really working on two different Facebook pages.
Right.
So how do you get it all done? What are some of the tricks you're using to make sure that you're able to do that and still, go home at the end of the day and not feel like you left all kinds of work undone?
Yep. So I use Agora Pulse, the Facebook scheduler planner, and I do that for both Aging and In-Home services and Pace's Facebook pages and LinkedIn.
Okay.
And it's just a game changer.
Okay.
Because not only can I schedule the posts, but I can also kind of get a quick glance of the analytics from there. And the calendar view is just a godsend.
So is there any cross-posting between the two entities, or is it all unique? What you're doing for Pace has really no relevance to what you're doing for Aging and In-Home Services?
There is occasional cross-posting, and that's actually just for specific events.
Yep.
Like, this is actually, September is a great example because it's National Pace Month.
Okay.
So on Aging and In-Home's Facebook page, we'll be doing some pushing of Pace, like, hey, go check out their website, their Facebook page. And it's going to be some of the same content for Pace and Aging.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. So some overlap, but most of it's going to be unique to each of those entities.
Right.
And thanks for reminding me that it's Pace Month, because when I see my neighbor, Katie Huffam, I will say Happy Pace Month, and she'll be like, how does he know that? Our secret will remain. But I will use that to my advantage with my neighbor, Katie. So tell me a little bit about how do you and Megan work together in a little more detail? So you're handling social media, you're handling events. What are some of the things that Megan takes on, and how do you intersect when it's a small team? How do you work together?
Yeah. So Megan has kind of a rough job, I would say, because not only does she have to handle the marketing side of things, she also has to do fundraising and like grant writing and that kind of thing.
I didn't realize she had grant writing. That explains what she's doing with most of her time. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So when it comes to like working together, what I will tend to do, kind of as I mentioned before, is I'll create the content, write the copy, and try and consolidate as much of it into like one email as I can.
Okay.
And then pass that on to her. And as she gets around to it, she can approve that.
Okay.
And send little like tweaks. We use just Word for those simple things. So
yeah. Well, I'm sure with that grant writing responsibility, there's times when she has to do deep work and say, you know, for the next 2 hours, I'm going to be focused on this. And that allows you to kind of keep things running while she's focused on those bigger tasks. So it sounds like a pretty good collaboration.
Yeah, we're a pretty well-oiled machine.
Well, good. Well, good. Well, I want to pivot to some more quick hit questions. You can be as verbose with these as you would like, but they allude to some of the things we've already talked about. But the first one has to do with career success. You've had a lot of success early on. You've learned some things, as you mentioned, from some of the jobs you've had in the past, learned some new things in your current position. What would you say is the most important thing you've taken away from all that? If you were giving someone advice about how to have a successful, fulfilling career, what might you say to them?
Actually, I think you kind of answered it in the question. It's always being open to learn something new. I don't feel like I'm comfortable unless I'm like, you know, taking a new class or if I have some sort of training that I'm working on. Just feeling like I'm not letting my knowledge of marketing or my industry stagnate. Or not feeling complacent.
You just recently, I was stalking your LinkedIn profile, obviously, earlier. You just earned a certificate, another certificate. What was that in recently, in addition to the social media certificate? Yeah,
so I actually took another PFW continuing ed class, and this one was for nonprofit management.
Okay.
So that one was all about, they talked about marketing for nonprofits, and they actually got a little bit into grant writing as well.
Okay. So, all right. So you've made a decision that a bachelor's degree is great, but my education doesn't stop there. Do you see yourself continuing to do that? And if so, what do you think you'll pursue down the line?
Absolutely. I mean, getting a master's degree would be awesome. Right now, I'm just kind of focusing on the experience.
Yeah.
But I can totally see myself getting a master's in marketing at some point.
Yep.
I haven't made any concrete plans for that yet.
Yeah, well, no pressure. No one will come back and say, but you said on this episode that you were going to get a master's degree. But no, I think that's great. I think the idea of always being willing to learn, and I also like what you said earlier about your experience at DeBran, how you could have just said, this is just a job, I'm going to do the bare minimum, but you said, there are transferable skills that I can learn here. They're going to serve me regardless of where I go.
Yeah, and one thing I want to touch on about that is actually like there are crazy like obscure connections that you wouldn't think would matter but actually can be like big in shaping your career. Megan actually worked at DeBrand as well. And because she knew what their standards were for like customer service, she knew, oh, this kid worked there for 5 years. I know he's going to be kick butt. So, So you
never worked together.
Nope.
She had predated your time there, but she knew the standards that they had and said, he must be pretty good if he passed that test.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, and I think there's something to be said for that. Whatever job it is you're pursuing, if there's some kind of common connection, that generally is going to serve you well as long as you make good use of it. And it sounds like you did. So, yeah. Okay. So the second quick hit question I want to ask has to do with the work you do. And this can be about aging and in-home services. It could be about the nonprofit world. It could be about your role. What's a myth or misconception that you think exists? People think it's one way when really that's not the way it is at all. Or maybe something that's underappreciated that you think deserves more attention. What's one thing that you want to either debunk or amplify?
Yeah. So this is one I actually want to kind of like emphasize for aging and in-home services. So when I'm out in the community, I kind of get a lot of people who say, like, they look at my table and they say, oh, aging and in-home services, that's not for me. I'm not old yet, or I'm still happy at home.
Yeah.
But the reality is so much of what we do is for caregivers as well, and supporting people who, what we like to say is, you don't know us until you need us.
So let me dig into that a little bit. Why do you think it's important that caregivers be cared for? Isn't that just part of the job? You have aging parents, you have to muscle through it and take care of them. Why is it important that organizations exist that can give them some relief?
Great question. If you are a caregiver who is struggling, if you're feeling burnt out, you are actually not giving the quality of care that your care recipient deserves. And what's more, if you're feeling burnt out, that can actually be pretty detrimental to your health. So by not, being mindful and focusing on yourself, you can actually be causing more harm to both yourself and your care recipient.
Well, that's a pretty unique position. Are there other organizations that do this type of work, or is yours the only one you know of that provides that service to those caregivers?
So there are like home care agencies.
Yeah.
They kind of do something similar, providing caregiving in the home.
Yeah.
But as far as like government funded programs, we are kind of like the only one in the area that does that.
Interesting. Well, it's funny because as much as I've talked to Katie about her work and Megan and now you, light bulbs are going off about friends of mine who have aging parents who might want to know more about what you do. They may have thought to date, that's not for me. I don't fit the age bracket, but maybe they should dig a little deeper. So,
absolutely.
All right.
I would encourage them to do so.
Okay. So last quick hit question for you. Being a marketer in 2024 means that you have to learn how to be efficient. You have to do more with less, it seems. How are you doing that? What's a tool or a trick or a tip or a hack, call it whatever you want, that you use in your work? We've already talked about Agorapulse, but maybe another one that is important to you that helps you get the job done.
Definitely. So I talked about how graphic design is a pretty big part of my job for the Facebook posts and the newsletter.
Yeah.
I love Canva, but more than that, I actually love this app called SIP.
Okay, we've had multiple people on the podcast talk about Canva, so I'm glad you're going to go in a different direction, but I have never heard of SIP. Tell me what SIP is. Is it like SIP, like sip a drink? Okay.
Sip a drink.
All right.
So it's part of a collection of apps called SetApp.
Okay.
But I like SIP specifically because you can... Essentially, it's like a color palette picker. It pops up on your taskbar when you have it installed, and then you can click on it at any time, and it's just an eyedrop tool. And it like identifies any color on your screen. And that saves so much time, like when you're editing things, like if you're turning a flyer into like a graphic for your newsletter or like for a Facebook post. It saves me so much time.
All right, so this next question is going to be asked completely out of ignorance and will sound about as ignorant as it really is. But can't you do that within Canva? Isn't there an eyedropper within Canva?
Definitely, but for that, there's like the hassle of you have to upload whatever like flyer or piece of content that you want to repurpose.
Okay.
So with SIP, what you can do is you can just open that. And then you can... like outside of Canva, go to your eyedropper, your SIP tool, and then identify a color.
All right.
And more than that, you can like set your color palettes for like, you can create your aging and in-home color palette, your pace color palette. And just have those like hex codes readily available anytime. And that's a game changer, like on the day-to-day. So.
Well, and I'm sure that for someone who's not a graphic designer, not as meaningful as someone who has to have that at the ready all the time. Yeah. So this is a complement to Canva, really, more than anything else?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Not a replacement for it.
No, by no means.
So still a shout out to Canva, but a new shout out for SIP, which I've never heard of.
You can make it even more efficient with SIP.
So. Oh, well, cool. All right. Well, that is great. That's why we do this, is to learn new things. And even though I'm not smart enough to do anything about that, I learned something new today. Well, thanks, Sam. I really appreciate you being on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anthony.
And thanks for everyone who took the opportunity to listen to this episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. We will be back next time with another great guest and more advice about things like SIP. Who knows what we're going to get? So we hope you listen then. Thanks.